tell us where you work.
I work for the Oakland County Sheriff's Office in the forensic laboratory there.
Okay. And how long have you been with the Oakland County Sheriff's Office?
I'm in my 17th year.
And prior to working with the Oakland County Sheriff's Office, did you work in law enforcement?
Yes, I did.
And what did you do and where did you work?
I worked for the City of Pontiac at the police department, where I was a crime scene investigator there for almost 9 years.
Okay. So also law enforcement, you've been involved over 25 years?
It'll be 25 years on March 17th of this year.
Okay. And what is your specific role right now with the Sheriff's Office?
I'm a latent print supervisor along with the crime scene supervisor for crime scenes out in the field.
Okay. And tell us specifically about crime scene supervision. What does that mean?
Well, I run a unit of, I have 6 employees, including myself, that respond to crime scenes when called upon to do an investigation out in the field for identification of evidence, documentation, preservation, and collection of evidence to be used to help figure out what happened at crime scenes.
Okay. So you said when called upon, is it every crime scene that you and your team are called out, or does it just depend on the circumstances?
Typically, for the crime scene unit to be called out, it has to be of a major crime or of a heinous nature, typically murders and maybe sexual assaults that are covered that would need to be processed at a higher level than other evidence technicians that I have on the road.
Okay. So how often would you or your team be called out, let's say, on a weekly basis?
Right now, our average is probably twice a month. So, thankfully, we don't have a murder happen every day in the county of Oakland. So, major crimes that we are doing are probably a couple a month. Sometimes it may be more, sometimes it may be less. But right now, statistically, we're about 2 times a month.
Okay. Now, prior to joining the Sheriff's Office, did you have the opportunity to attend an Institute of Higher Learning?
Yes, I have a forensic science degree from Michigan State University, and I've taken continuing education classes ever since then upon my employment in 1999.
So when you say continuing education, is this a field that's evolving?
Every day. Okay,
and then do you have training to evolve along with it?
Yes, there is a yearly conference that I'm a member of, the IAI, which is a conference and a huge body of people that we get together and talk about technology and how everything advances in not only latent prints but crime scene investigations, to make sure that we kind of stay up with the new technology and that we're utilizing that technology to assist in crime scene processing.
Now, how often would you say in your career you've processed a crime scene?
Oh man, I'd have to say in the thousands.
Now, when I say process a crime scene, I guess that suggests an answer there. Is there a specific process that you go through when you're reviewing a crime scene?
I mean, there's definitely a standard as far as the basics, I would say. Upon arrival to a crime scene, you're going to do an assessment, maybe what we call a walkthrough. You're going to assess what you actually have at that crime scene, trying to identify anything that may be important to that case. And there's certain documentation that can be done via notes, photographs, possibly a sketch or measurements, or as we've progressed with technology, we have a 3D scanner that we can use that to assist us in documenting our crime scenes, along with collection of evidence at a crime scene. Now, there's additional things that can be done, but it doesn't happen on every case. But those are the basics that would most likely be performed on every crime scene that we would go on.
Okay. Now, prior to undergoing that, is there a conversation that you or a member of your team would have with a detective in charge?
Absolutely, with the OIC, so that way we would know what we're kind of looking for. If we know the cause of this crime scene, if it's a homicide, if it's a stabbing, we're looking for a knife, if it's a shooting, we're looking for firearms evidence, so that we can kind of get an idea. Now, if we find something that may be different, then we would get with that OIC or that detective and let them know of our findings that on our initial walkthrough.
Okay. I'd like to direct your attention now to November the 30th of 2021. Do you remember that day?
Yes, I do.
Okay, were you working that day?
Yes, I was.
In what capacity were you working?
It was during day shift, and so I was working in the actual laboratory that day.
Okay. And at that point, were you the crime scene supervisor?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And were you the individual on call if anything should happen that day?
Yes, I was.
Okay. So, were you called in to process the crime scene at Oxford High School November 30th, 2021?
Yes, I was.
Did you actually go to that location?
Yes, I did.
Do you recall approximately when you arrived there?
It was 2:40 in the afternoon. I received the call at 1:15, and by the time I assembled my team and grabbed our resources, it was 2:40 before I got up to the actual high school.
Okay, so that was after the scene was cleared, is that right?
At the beginning stages of being cleared.
Okay. Now, I'd like to talk to you about your specific process and your role when you arrived at Oxford High School November the 30th of 21.
Okay.
All right, so you arrived there about 2:40, you said, with your team?
Correct.
Okay. And tell us, please, what's the first thing you did when you arrived?
Waited for guidance on what was going to be done first. So the first information was that I needed to collect a firearm that was the result of what had taken place at the high school.
Okay. And did you do that?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And tell us how that occurred, please.
The firearm was located within a garbage can, a small waste paper basket garbage can that was placed there by a deputy that had collected the item from the individual. So I viewed it, photographed it, and then collected it at that time.
Okay. And that firearm, after it was collected, was taken to the forensic laboratory at the Oakland County Sheriff's Office. May I approach, Judge? This has been admitted to People's 28. This is Forensic Laboratory Reports, request number 6. So just to confirm, that was authored by Mr. Robert Charlton from the Sheriff's
Sir,
Office.
I'm gonna object. These are leading questions. He can review the exhibit and testify about the exhibit, Your Honor.
It's already been admitted. So
Well, yeah, the exhibit's admitted, but she wasn't objecting to the exhibit, she was objecting to the leading question.
that's fine. Was that weapon confirmed to be the murder weapon?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And is that reflected in that report?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. Now, after you collected the weapon, that's reflected in that forensic laboratory report right there. What did you do next?
Waited for the scene to be cleared. There was intel still being obtained by the investigators on scene at other sites. So it was several hours before me and my team actually got into the high school to see what I actually had, or what we actually had as far as for crime scene processing.
Okay. Now, in this particular scene, at this time, November the 30th, were you made aware of the path that the shooter took throughout the high school?
I was given a general direction, and then the scene was contained to one wing of the high school.
Okay. Do you recall the number or the name of that wing?
It was the 200 wing of the high school.
And when you process a scene, do you also author a report?
Yes, I do.
May I approach the witness?
Sure.
This is Exhibit 14. Sir, take a look at that and tell me if you recognize it.
Yes, I do.
Okay. And what is it that I just handed you?
This is my 5-page crime scene report that I prepared at a later date after the crime scene processing of my findings that I had documented at the crime scene on November 30th.
Okay, so that's already been admitted into evidence. That's Exhibit 14. But so the jury's aware, does that fairly accurately depict what you observed and what you processed and collected that day?
Yes, it does.
Now, did you obtain a map to help you with the processing of the scene?
Yes, I did. I call maybe a blueprint or a schematic of the overall diagram of the entire school.
Okay. And after you obtain that, do you make notations on that?
Yes, there was a couple of us that worked on the actual schematic of the location of the evidence and the victims within the high school.
I'm going to show you. May I approach judging that screen on?
Sure.
You may have to look
This
at.
one? Yeah, we'll probably have to get that fixed. See if you push that out, it kind of strobe lights.
You go ahead and turn that on.
I can see this.
You can see that? Okay,
if
great.
That's okay.
So I'm showing you what's going to be this People's 15. Sir, do you recognize this?
Yes, I do.
And how so?
This is the schematic drawing that was prepared by the school or some other agency as far as for the school layout. And once again, this is the schematic that was used to place the piece of evidence on where they were located within the school outside of classrooms and where the victims were located within the school.
Okay. These notations were made by lab personnel?
Yes, it was. There's some by myself, and there's also by Rob Charlton, who works in the firearms unit. That's also a crime scene investigator with me.
So what do these notations signify?
There's numbers that are circled that would also coincide with the placards that were placed next to the piece of evidence within the crime scene for documentation purposes.
Okay, when you say placard, we're going to go through some pictures soon, but if you see a yellow placard with a number, that's what you're referring to?
That is correct.
And why is that done?
It's used mainly for photographic reasons, but also helps us to keep straight each piece of evidence that was collected, given a location of where it was within that crime scene.
Okay, and photographs were taken in this situation?
Yes, they were.
Okay. Now I'm going to go through, okay, this is 15, and you said it was the 200 hallway? That was the wing the shooting was contained to?
That is correct.
Okay, so we see numbers, not the notations from the crime lab, but numbers of classrooms here. So 258, that's the number of a classroom?
That is correct.
Okay, and then to the far right, it goes to approximately 214, 213, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. So we'll go one portion at a time here.
Okay.
Okay, so this is a zoomed in version of Exhibit 15. What does this depict?
This is an area outside of 258 and 256 where two of the victims were found that contained a large amount of evidence. And then you can start to see where it turns to the north, which would be to the right of this photograph. That would work your way up to the north, which is the remainder of the 200 wing that contained more evidence outside the rooms from 249 all the way down to 213.
Okay. So in the course of your investigation, did you come to learn what bathroom the shooter walked out of directly
Yep.
before the shooting?
Sorry. Yes, I was given the information that it was found just west of room 258.
So that would be this bathroom here that's highlighted?
That is correct.
Okay. So specifically now from what you recovered from the bathroom in this shorter wing of the 200 hallway, I'm going to take you through the path the shooter took with these pictures. Judge, two of these pictures have images that I'd ask the court to instruct the media not to film.
Your Honor, I'm not going to object to that. I am going to just indicate for the record, I believe that it's Exhibit 17 and Exhibit 26 that I will be objecting to, renewing objections that I made previously on the record to those two photographs.
Okay.
Is that correct, Mr. Keith?
Both of those things are correct, and I did want the court to know that we did speak with the victims prior to the trials, and they understand.
Okay, so you're right now presenting exhibit number 17?
First, it'll be Exhibit 16, but then it's Exhibit 17 after that.
Okay, so both of those images cannot be shown
Correct.
to the press? And are the victims who are here familiar with what those photos contain?
Yes, Judge.
So they're welcome to exit if they feel the need, right?
Thank you, Judge.
Okay, so you guys get it, right?
Which two?
The next two, 16 and
Next two
17.
after this?
Oh,
Yeah.
I'll make sure before I display it on the screen to let the court know.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll start with the bathroom next to 258. That's Exhibit 16 here. And what does this photograph depict?
This is in the stall within the bathroom, which would be found just west of room 258, that contained a red backpack and miscellaneous items such as electronic equipment, books, journals. There's a Gatorade bottle, amongst other miscellaneous items.
Okay, so all of that was collected as evidence?
That is correct.
Okay. Judge, the next photograph is Exhibit 17. I asked the media not to film this.
Yes, could you refrain from...
I'm just going to shoot the witness.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay,
He's filming, you're filming the witness.
Yeah.
thank you. This is Exhibit 17. What are we looking at here?
This is a photograph taken outside of that bathroom that I just spoke of. This photograph is taken from the west to the east, showing the hallway that would be found just south of rooms 258 and 256. And you can start to see the yellow placards that I spoke of to depict the evidence that was found in that hallway area, along with one of the victims that's found on the middle of this photograph, but on the right-hand side of the hallway when you're looking east.
So that's Hannah St. Juliana, and then the other victim is Madison Baldwin, is that correct?
That is correct. It's hard to see on this photograph because it's far away, but it would be on the left-hand side of the hallway, further east as you move down the hallway.
Okay. Sir, tell us what you recovered from this portion of the 200 hallway.
There were several fire cartridge cases. There were 14 found, 14 fire cartridge cases found in this portion of the hallway, along with several fired bullets and bullet fragments along this hallway area that were found in several areas of the hallway.
What's the cartridge case?
A cartridge case is the portion of a bullet that actually holds the bullet itself. And in a semi-automatic weapon, it will eject from the side of the weapon. So the bullet will go through the barrel portion or the end of the firearm. And the fired cartridge case will then eject more than likely out the right-hand side, depending on which firearm we're talking about. About 99% of semi-automatic weapons will eject to the right. So the bullet will go out the barrel, and the fired cartridge case that held that bullet portion will eject to the right-hand side of that weapon.
Okay. So in order for it to be a fired cartridge case, that would have to mean that the gun was actually fired.
That is correct.
Okay. So with 14 fired cartridge cases, that would indicate that the gun was shot 14 times in this portion of the hallway?
That is correct.
Now, continuing down the shooter's path, I'm going to ask you what happened, or what you located past rooms 256 as the hallway curves to 249. So this is room 258 on the left, next to that is room 256, and as it curves it's 249. Is that your recollection?
That is correct.
Okay. This is People's Exhibit 18, so this is further down the same portion of the 200 hallway.
That is correct. It's just past the second victim on the left-hand side.
All right, tell us what was located here.
There is more fired bullets and fired cartridge cases, along with a empty gun magazine that was located just around the corner from this evidence here.
Okay. Now, as that corner turns down the 200 hallway, this is People's Exhibit 19. I should say for the record, all these have been admitted. Counsel did state her objections on the record, but this court can rule upon.
Yes.
Thank you, Judge.
Correct.
This is Exhibit 19. What are we looking at here?
This is now a photograph taken from the south to the north. As we're moving, I would say down in the numbers, but it's up as far as, like, if you're thinking about going north, down the 200 wing. So you're moving away from that bathroom where everything may have started. And this is once again indicating the evidence that was located from room 249 to 213, which ended up containing 18 more fired cartridge cases in this area.
Okay. So we had 14 in the shorter portion of the 200 hallway and 18 from room 249 to 213 down this long hallway?
That is correct.
Okay. And again, that means the firearm was fired 18 more times there, at least what you recovered?
That is correct.
This is Exhibit 20, specifically placard 35. What's that?
So placard 35, or number 35, is the firearms magazine that I spoke of that was found in the hallway there.
Now, up and down this portion of the hallway specifically, did you find evidence that the shooter fired directly into classrooms as well?
Yes, there were several classrooms that were found to be fired into.
Okay. This is Exhibit 21, depicting classroom 247. First of all, what's that rod that we're looking at?
So it's what we'll consider what we call a trajectory rod to show the path of the bullet that was fired at that location. So it's just shown for kind of demonstrative purposes that you can see where that bullet actually traveled into that room.
Okay, so this indicates to us that the gun was shot directly into room 247.
That is correct, right through the door trim there.
This is Exhibit 22. This is depicting classroom 244. What do we see here?
Once again, a trajectory rod was inserted into the window portion. It got shattered, but it still stayed intact. But you can see the trajectory rod showing where the bullet passed through the window that was fired in room 244.
This is Exhibit 12. It's room 224. What do we see here?
You can see the room, the door to the room. There are 3 trajectory rods that were placed in it to show that there was 3 shots that were fired into room 224.
It's Exhibit 10. This is also room 224 with the door open.
That is correct, and you can see on the inside of the door, it's just the continuation of that trajectory rod to show, that those shots were fired into that room.
Okay. And we have Ms. Darnell, Molly Darnell testified yesterday. This was her classroom. This is what you refer to in the window here.
That is correct.
Okay. And then the file cabinet.
Yes, there was, I would say in the window is what we call a perforation. So one of the bullets passed through the door and then went through the window that was never found because it went out into the exterior of the school. There was what we call a ricochet that was found in the file cabinet, which is right there in the middle that the prosecutor is highlighting. There was also what we call another ricochet that hit the chair, the backing of the chair. And then eventually a fired bullet was found embedded in a book that was found on the bookshelf behind the teacher's desk.
Okay, thank you. And that's room 224. This is Exhibit 23. This is classroom 223. We have a side-by-side view of this. What do we see here?
Once again, this is showing how a bullet would have struck the door. This actual impression shows that the bullet hit something additional prior to hitting this door, so it's what we call a tumbling bullet. So instead of being like a round impression or a pattern where a bullet would be circular, the bullet has now changed its path and it's tumbling, so now it hit it kind of going sideways. And that's depicted on the right-hand side there, that you can see the sticker that was placed below it.
Here's Exhibit 24. This is classroom 220. What do we see here?
Once again, you can see there's a trajectory rod and the outside of the door showing the path of travel that the bullet was fired into room 220.
And finally, Exhibit 25. This is classroom 215. What do we see here?
Once again, these are trajectory rods. They're just a different color because we ran out of pink, but we're on to orange trajectory rods that are fired into the window outside of room 215, showing that the bullets were fired from the outside to the inside of that room.
Okay, thank you, sir. Now, did you come to learn that once the shooter reached rooms 213, 214, that he backtracked down the 200 hallway?
I was told that information.
Okay. Sir, did you process the men's bathroom in the 200 hallway that was across from classroom 233?
Yes, I believe it was either 233 or 231. It was in that same general area.
The camera person is asking when they can resume.
After the next picture, Judge. Okay. This is Exhibit 26. Sir, what do we see here?
This is a photograph taken outside of that bathroom that we're talking of, outside or across from 231. You can start to see inside the bathroom there's a black backpack, along with there's I believe it's a live round or a cartridge as we call it, just found outside of the bathroom. And then you can start to see that there's a large pool of blood inside of that bathroom area. And this is just the entrance to the bathroom itself from the exterior of the hallway.
Did you come to learn this is where Justin Schilling was killed?
Yes, I was.
Did you also recover a fired shell or fired cartridge in this area as well?
Yes, a fired cartridge case was located in this bathroom.
Is that included in the count of 18 you described earlier?
Yes, it is.
Now, sir, you mentioned earlier the firearm was recovered. This is Exhibit 27. Is this a photograph right outside of that bathroom that we just saw?
Yes, it was not taken by me because the firearm had been collected by the on-scene deputies when the suspect was apprehended.
Okay. But that is the firearm that you collected?
That is correct.
That's a 6-hour 9mm handgun?
Correct.
Based upon your crime scene investigation, how many times did the shooter fire that weapon inside Oxford High School on November the 30th?
32 times.
And how many unfired rounds, how many bullets were recovered, either from that magazine or elsewhere?
18.
So a total of 50 rounds of 9mm ammunition was taken to Oxford High School?
That is correct.
Thank you. I have nothing further, Judge.
Should I give them a break right now?